The man, the myth, the legend. Most people see actor William Shatner and immediately think of the brave Captain James Tiberius Kirk, commander of the USS Enterprise. Shatner has become synonymous with Star Trek and sci-fi as a whole. Along with Leonard Nimoy, Shatner and his space adventures redefined sci-fi for an entire generation of fans, and his peculiar acting style has made him one of the most recognizable actors in the genre. In today's list, we'll take a look at the top 10 William Shatner movies of all time.
Who are you?
Think about it, but don't take too long. I'm out of time. You change your mind, this is where I'll be.
Number 10, Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. One thing that sets Star Wars and Star Trek apart is that while George Lucas's universe is more concerned with spectacle and traditional storytelling, Star Trek always took a more philosophical approach to sci-fi. The fifth Star Trek film, The Final Frontier, deals with the ultimate psychological question: does God exist?
Lasers on stun! Get rid of the mounts. Sudo, take out that light.
Directed by Shatner himself, The Final Frontier follows the crew of the USS Enterprise as they chase Sybok, a renegade Vulcan, and Mr. Spock's long-lost half-brother. Sybok has become obsessed with the idea that God resides at the center of the galaxy. However, what he finds there might not be the divine entity he was hoping for. The Final Frontier is a divisive movie for fans of the original Star Trek series. It's also not a secret that the movie went through production hell, being subject to many rewrites as the cast didn't agree with some of Shatner's ideas for their characters, including Spock betraying Captain Kirk.
In order to lower and raise the shields as quickly as possible, we're going to forgo the tractor beam and fly her in manually.
Number 9, Kingdom of the Spiders. Not every William Shatner film has him as the captain of the Enterprise. 11 years after the Star Trek series debut, Shatner was already a well-known face in the sci-fi genre, so it was clear that he would make the best choice to star in a Nature on the Rampage kind of movie. Somewhere in rural Arizona, an army of deadly tarantulas terrorizes a small farming community.
I mean, the stuff is lethal. The amount you have to use could endanger the whole town. One whiff, I mean.
Listen, Rack, will you let me handle this?
Shatner plays Rack Hansen, the town's veterinarian. Aided by Diane Ashley, an arachnologist, the pair has to do everything in their power to stop the arachnid rampage and save their little town. Shatner initially refused to star in the movie. Director John Cardos had to convince him personally to join the production. After a short conversation, Shatner was not just convinced about his role, he also wanted to direct the movie's possible sequel. Unfortunately, for him, a sequel to Kingdom of the Spiders never happened.
I was really worried about that.
Look, Baron Spray didn't even touch those spider hills. I think someone should take a run out to Colby's place.
Number 8, Big Bad Mama. A 70s action comedy film about a mother that corrupts her daughters into a life of crime. Big Bad Mama had all the flair and unmistakable rebel spirit of the crime movies of the 70s. Starring Angie Dickinson as Wilma McClatchy, Shatner appears as William J. Baxter, a bank robber and dishonest gambler with whom Wilma falls in love.
My funds are at our local bank.
Suppose I just make my own bed.
However, as the movie shows us, crime doesn't pay. The ending of Big Bad Mama is a bummer compared to the rest of the film, and it's all because of Wilma and William's forbidden love. The movie is a spiritual successor to 1970's Bloody Mama, a film with very similar themes. Both films were produced by Roger Corman, who's been called the Pope of Pop Cinema for his popular exploitation movies.
The police in 3 states are looking for that girl. Fingerprints were found, Dillis. There's no possible chance we're going to get away with it.
Why not?
Number 7, Star Trek: The Motion Picture. The poster for Star Trek: The Motion Picture reads, "The adventure is just beginning," and the same could be said about Star Trek's movie history. 10 years after the cancellation of the original series, Star Trek would return to the limelight with its first feature-length film. After the success of Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it was clear that audiences were ready for a new era of sci-fi films.
Report to you, sir.
It is my intention to be on that ship following that meeting. Report to me in 1 hour.
The plot of the motion picture isn't the most complicated Star Trek story ever told. An alien cloud, known as V'ger, is rapidly approaching Earth, destroying everything in its path. After a time away from the Enterprise, Kirk and his crew are forced to return to duty on a mission to determine V'ger's origin and save planet Earth. The motion picture wasn't an immediate success with fans, and it just barely made enough money for Paramount to approve a sequel. Someone less than impressed with the movie was William Shatner, who was convinced he was watching the end of the Star Trek franchise unfold before his eyes during the premiere.
It's running on records. Earth defensives. Starfleet strength.
Number 6. Star Trek Generations. In 1987, Star Trek The Next Generations would continue the series' legacy on TV with a whole new cast of characters, including fan favorite Captain Jean-Luc Picard as the new commander of the Enterprise. In 1994, Star Trek Generations was conceived as a way for the original Star Trek crew to pass the baton to a new generation.
Beam those people aboard the Enterprise.
What about the gravimetric distortions? They'll tear us apart.
Risk is part of the game. You want to sit in that chair.
In Generations, Captain Kirk and Picard join forces to stop Tolian Soren, a mad scientist that wishes to return to an interdimensional plane known as the Nexus. In doing so, however, Soren could end up destroying an entire planetary system, something that Kirk and Picard simply can't allow to happen. Although the movie wasn't well received by critics, it holds emotional meaning for many fans of the Star Trek series. This movie marks the final in-universe appearance of Captain Kirk, as the captain's journey concludes at the movie's climax.
Did we do it?
They make a difference.
Oh, yes.
Number 5. Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. Still coming to terms with Spock's demise, the crew of the Enterprise is called into action once more to give their dear friend the send-off he deserves. Risking their careers, Admiral Kirk and his crew must travel to the Genesis planet to retrieve Spock's body, fuse it with his living spirit, and finally lay him to rest on his homeworld, Vulcan.
Gentlemen, your work today has been outstanding. I intend to recommend you all for promotion in whatever fleet we end up serving.
The Search for Spock is one of the most emotional Star Trek movies, and part of that could be attributed to its top-notch director. Leonard Nimoy would become the first Star Trek cast member to direct one of the films, and he doesn't disappoint. This movie also includes the death of Kirk's son, which Shatner considers one of the most heart-wrenching moments for his character.
I have had enough of you!
Number 4. Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. The final Star Trek movie to feature the original series cast, The Undiscovered Country takes inspiration from the political climate of 1991, particularly the fall of the Berlin Wall. When the idea for a 6th Star Trek film was in its early stages, the studio wanted a prequel to the original show, an idea that was refused by both the original cast and fans.
Reverse engines. On the stern. 1.5 impulse power.
Back off! Back off!
After the Klingon moon of Praxis is destroyed, the Klingon Empire aims to establish a peace accord with their longtime enemies, the United Federation of Planets. Unfortunately, not everyone is so enthusiastic about this peace agreement, and the crew of the Enterprise will have to fight against conspirators who wish for an eternal conflict. Shatner isn't the only Shakespearean actor in The Undiscovered Country. Christopher Plummer plays the nefarious General Chang in a role that's considered to be one of the best villains of classic Star Trek. Sadly, Plummer, a mentor to Shatner and an excellent actor, passed away in February of 2021.
As much to the crew of the Enterprise, I owe you my thanks.
Nice to see you in action one more time, Captain Kirk.
Number 3. Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. As we mentioned before, one of the strengths of Star Trek over other sci-fi franchises is how easily its formula adapts to unconventional stories. And when it comes to weird, seemingly out-of-place stories, there's no beating 1986's Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home.
We are probably already visible to the tracking devices of the time.
Quite right, Mr. Spock. Engage cloaking device, Mr. Tigger.
Returning to Earth to face trial after the events of the search for Spock, the former crew of the Enterprise finds the planet under siege by an alien probe. The aliens try to make contact with the now extinct humpback whales, prompting Kirk and his crew to travel back to 1986 to save the Earth. The movie is a bit more lighthearted than other Star Trek films, with much more comedic moments spread throughout its wild plot. As for a random piece of Trekkie trivia, The Voyage Home marks the only instance in which Admiral Kirk utters the phrase, "Scotty, beam me up."
You can't. Our next stop is the 23rd century.
Well, I don't care. I've got nobody here. I have got to
I haven't
help
got time
those
to
whales.
argue with you.
Number 2. The Intruder. Way before the days of Star Trek, William Shatner would star in The Intruder, a racial drama directed by Roger Corman. On the eve of racial integration in a small southern town, a man comes, calling himself a social reformer. The man's name is Adam Kramer, and he's a staunch believer in racial segregation.
And put forth a light that everyone and everybody's going to see and feel. This town I'm talking about, Caxton.
He begins inviting the people of the town to oppose desegregation, causing severe tensions among the inhabitants of the quiet settlement. Shatner plays the role of a racist con man, And even though his speeches and mannerisms are more than adequate for the kind of role he's portraying, director Roger Corman wasn't a fan of his work. He blamed Shatner for the film's commercial failure, although it might have had more to do with the movie's subject, as racial tensions were still quite high at the time.
I'm sick of listening to your rave. Now get out of here before I pull the trigger.
Our number one pick is Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. The second Star Trek film isn't just a good Star Trek story, it's one of the most important movies in sci-fi history. A continuation of the original series' 1967 episode, Space Seed, this film sees the return of Admiral Kirk's arch-nemesis, Khan Noonien Singh. After Khan escapes from his exile, he sets his aim towards the Genesis terraforming device. It's now up to the Enterprise's crew to save Earth once more, and for Kirk, this is personal.
As a physician, you of all people should appreciate the dangers of reopening old wounds.
Directed by Nicholas Meyer, The Wrath of Khan would need to fare better with critics than the first movie did, and to do so, the film had to undergo numerous rewrites to please test audiences. Ricardo Montalban had to momentarily pause his work on the TV series Fantasy Island to reprise his role as Khan, a wise decision as his performance is one of the best parts of the film. The movie was a success with the audience and the critics, and did overwhelmingly well in the box office. Shatner did an excellent job playing a more mature Kirk, and the scenes near the movie's climax, when someone close to him sacrifices himself, are some of the best dramatic moments in the history of Star Trek. Currently, The Wrath of Khan holds a score of 7.7 on IMDb.com, the highest for a Star Trek original series film.
He did not feel this sacrifice a vain or empty one. And we will not debate his profound wisdom at these proceedings.
Do you agree with our list? Be sure to comment below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and be the first to receive new Top 10 videos from Stream TV.